In the heated in-state rivalry that is the Cyhawk, the Hawkeyes certainly made a splash with a big hiring yesterday, but there is no reason for the Iowa State Cyclones to be worried, and we're talking about why that is today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day. Make this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. I say that with so much emphasis because today's episode is kind of centered around the Cyhawk rivalry. We're going to talk first about Iowa's hiring of Ben McCollum and why I think Iowa State will be just fine. There's absolutely no reason to worry. Then Christian Rao will join us to talk a little bit more about that in the second segment. Can't wait to dive into that with him. Obviously, Kansas State, a big part of that. And then finally, we're going to wrap things up with some transfer portal news. Things have gotten loud after Iowa State's exit from the NCAA tournament, March Madness, if you will. I can't wait to dive in to all of that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. And so, you know, it's surprising sometimes when Iowa makes some big-time news, that's for sure. And the hiring of Ben McCollum from Drake certainly has everyone's heads turned, certainly has everyone's eyes peeled, and certainly has everyone's attention at this moment. Obviously, the firing of Fran McCaffrey was certainly something that I think a lot of people kind of saw coming at this point, and somebody has to step into that role. I think that's kind of how that works as far as I know. And Iowa decided on Ben McCollum from Drake, who finished 31-4 with the Drake Bulldogs, finishing first in the Missouri Valley Conference. Quite an achievement. And there is certainly a lot of noise online right now about this hire. Iowa fans are beyond hyped up, and I'm here to tell you that this is not a big deal. Now, I know this isn't Locked On Hawkeyes or Locked On Iowa, whatever it is. And so I can see why there might be some confusion, but there is a direct rivalry between these two schools, and it goes deeper than just the games that they play. I think it's pretty fair to say that Iowa and Iowa State are the two biggest colleges in the state of Iowa. Obviously, Northern Iowa would like a word, Drake would like a word, and then you could name 1,000 other colleges as well. Obviously, Iowa Western, just to name one. Obviously, Iowa Western making a lot of noise right now, but that being said, Iowa State, kind of the top two dogs in this fight. And so I think it's worth noting. I think it's worth talking about and why I think Iowa State is going to be completely fine. Yes, Iowa State will not play each other to decide who wins the Big 12 championship. Iowa State will not play each other to decide who wins the Big 10 championship. There's a chance that they play each other in, the first round of the NCAA playoffs when Iowa is a 16 seed and Iowa State is a 1 seed. I mean, that is a very real possibility. But, outside of that, I don't know how much these two teams will be playing each other. There's, obviously during the regular season. But outside of that, this conversation isn't so much at a Iowa versus Iowa State level. It's more at a recruiting level. And so the first point I'd like to make here is that Iowa State's culture is simply unbeatable. Now, I've heard a lot of people talking about how the culture word isn't really worth all that much, and we just throw this word around. I don't think that's fair for Iowa State. I think Iowa State is beyond kind of that, just using the culture buzzword just to say it and to get people to look our way. I think the way that Iowa State runs their program, obviously football, something we've talked about over and over, but on the basketball side as well, I think it's very notable. I think Iowa State is obviously the way that TJ runs his program, you can't look past it. You can't look past the way that he cares for his players. Obviously with the injuries this year and guys sitting and really making it kind of about it's their decision at the end of the day, and not looking at them as if they're just numbers and a way to win games. That on top of just the culture between each player, right? Between Tamin Lipsey and Curtis Jones, or Deshaun Jackson and Joshua Jefferson, from just this last year's team, to take a few examples. I think the way that this team is run is by far one of the best in the nation, and obviously, therefore, in the state. I do think it outranks Iowa, just in my opinion. Now, outside of that, you're going to get into some other kind of nitty gritties, into some of the weeds, if you will. And one thing that Iowa State, obviously, just having been eliminated from the tournament, fresh into the transfer portal kind of situation, it's still developing. That is certainly true. And at the time of this recording, between now and when you listen to this, there's a chance that things have changed. But the transfer portal situation for Iowa and Iowa State, very different, very, very different. And I think that also speaks a little bit to kind of the situations going on. Now you got to remember Iowa is now going through a coaching change, and so some guys are going to decide to leave solely based on that decision alone. But after all this talk, yesterday, I was thinking, well, why is there all of these guys that want to leave if Ben McCollum is the savior for Iowa basketball? Now, nothing against Ben McCollum, and really nothing against the players either. It's kind of really just an organization for me, Iowa State, Iowa. I have nothing against the individual people. I just want to make that clear. But at the end of the day, I do think that all of the players leaving from Iowa is of note. I believe the number is up to 7 now. And I'll name them really quickly: Josh Dix, Owen Freeman, Brock Harding, Price Sanford, Laji Dembele, Cooper Koch, Riley Mulvey. Those are the names that I have at this moment in time. And those are some big names. I went ahead and looked back at the Iowa State game, in which obviously Iowa and Iowa State faced off in Kinnick earlier this year. Well, I guess it was last year, technically, in 2024. And almost all those names showed up on the box score, and a few of them in a big way for Iowa. And so, yes, we'll talk more about Iowa State and their transfer portal news just in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. But I think as it stands right now, the culture shows that Iowa State retains players. And something we've talked about on the football side a lot. There's a lot of guys that try, or a lot of teams that try to grab the guys off of Iowa State's roster, and they just choose to stay. It just shows, how great the culture is here. And there's not really a better word to even use. I'm using that word over and over because it's the best word to describe it. It's how the people are treated, how the players care for each other, and more importantly, how everyone is working towards the same goal. Now, that's not to say that Iowa doesn't have a culture. They're not all trying to win either, but I do think that Iowa State has it the best. I do. And obviously, you can look to TJ Otzelberger kind of at the helm of that. And then obviously the other assistant coaches as well. I don't think it's by accident that Iowa State extended TJ Otzelberger. I don't think it's by accident that we've seen such success from the Cyclones since TJ Otzelberger has gotten into the building. And I don't think it's by accident that we're seeing players stick around that, to name, well, I'm not going to name any names, but remember a name that had been talked about. Let's make sure you enjoy him while he's here because he probably won't be at Iowa State very long. Well, he's still here as far as I know. And so I do think that the way that Ames runs everything, the way that Iowa State and the Cyclones run everything, it's unbelievable. And that argument, I think Iowa State trumps Iowa by a long shot. The other argument then is home atmosphere. And that goes out to you. I'm speaking to you directly. Yes, Hilton magic is very much real. And so if we're going to talk about potential transfers into either of these colleges, or about, recruits, I think that, yes, the culture and the way that the programs are run is something that these players, either transferring in or being recruited, it's something that they look at very heavily. It's something that they take into deep consideration. And rightfully so. But also, I think that the environment and the culture of the fans is something that is very serious as well. And so when you look at a few of the comments made by Iowa players this year, and then you compare, you add on to that the home atmosphere of Hilton versus Kinnick, I think Iowa State is significantly better in that category as well. And so I hope Iowa does well, except for when they play Iowa State, I suppose. And it's great for the state. It really is, for Iowa, the state of Iowa, to get some recognition. I think that's awesome. I think it helps both teams when either of them succeed, just to see the name Iowa. Obviously, hopefully a state follows that. But it brings attention for the national media to the state as a whole that we all know and love. But outside of that, I mean, really, Iowa State, I think, has it in the bag. I think Iowa State's in a much better spot right now. And I don't think that's really all that undeniable. Christian Rao is going to help me break down this a little bit more, obviously, the hiring of Ben McCollum and what this could mean in a few other words. We're going to talk about that coming up right after this. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart, from top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut team of the week is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Despite losing their first 5 SEC games, Coach Cal's Hogs fought their way through the most rugged conference in college basketball to not only make the NCAA tournament, but knock off back-to-back national champion and Hall of Fame coaches en route to the Sweet 16. They accomplished all this without second leading scorer Boogie Flan for most of SEC play and without leading scorer and rebounder Adu Thero so far in the NCAA tournament. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Arkansas Razorbacks have done here. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com.
Nick Maravitz, Locked On Cyclones, Christian Rao, Locked On Kansas State. We are bringing a little crossover action to this episode here because we're both kind of talking the same topic. Obviously, we have some different points of view here, but I think it was a perfect time to come together and have this discussion, Nick. Obviously, Ben McCollum signed with Iowa to become the next head coach of their men's basketball team. I mentioned earlier how I think that it is a big deal for Kansas State. And I think I'll get into that in just a minute because I do think there is some sort of impact and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. But first, I think we have to really just address the elephant in the room. Obviously, Iowa State, there is a rivalry there. I don't think it's as good as Farmageddon personally, but there is a rivalry there. Are you worried at all about Ben McCollum in the Hawkeyes?
I am absolutely not worried at all. Really, at the end of the day, my thought process into this goes more into recruiting than it does to actual gameplay, because we all know Iowa is Iowa State's little brother. Okay, nothing's going to change there. It's a Cyclone state. It always has been, always will be, and that's reflected in the last, obviously, football and basketball games. So you can argue with me down in the comments down below. But really, recruiting is where I think this is going to make a bigger kind of splash, kind of noise. And I'm not worried at all, just because of, I'm going to quote Matt Campbell here when talking in, spring kind of football practice media. He said, hey, we've had guys trying to reach out to our players for 4 years and they just keep coming back. And that's what I'm going to reference. Iowa State culture is second to none. Nobody's going anywhere. Obviously, the transfer portal just opened up in Iowa State, seeing some moves early, but generally people that come to Iowa State stick around. And I think that really that speaks volumes. And so, yes, Ben McCollum will probably succeed as an Iowa head coach, but we really won't see each other that often. So I'm more focused on recruiting. And I think in that department, Iowa State has it locked down from any which angle, which I just kind of talked about prior to this.
That's a good point. You won't really see them maybe in the tournament, maybe in a few non-conference games here and there, which I do think non-conference is going to get a little bit more deeper and way more important now that the conference is moving from 20 games to 18 games next season, which I love for the fact I think that's going to be good for the conference, and we can start getting that SEC bias, Big Ten bias, and out of the way even more. But let's play devil's advocate just for a minute. Obviously, Ben McCollum has had a great rise to fame starting in D2, heading to Drake last season, had a good run with Drake. It seems like Drake is a nice stepping stone. Hate to say that for that university because they've been so great over the past few years in the tournament. They've been one of those Cinderella stories that you just love to root on for. But now that he is with Iowa, looking at it from a recruiting glasses, Fran McCaffrey, he was there from 2010 until last season.
Yeah.
That was a long time of stagnant type of play from Iowa. They never even made it to the Sweet 16 once during his tenure there. Could Ben McCollum quickly change that? Maybe try and change that narrative? Is that where maybe some concerns pop in?
I think that, and you never know exactly, because when TJ Otzelberger took over the Cyclones at 2-22, I don't think a lot of people thought that they'd be winning the Big 12 championship, the Big 12 tournament just a few years later. So I can't say that I know for sure exactly what's going to happen, but I can tell you this much. Iowa, there's an element of uncertainty there. But with Iowa State, you know what you're getting. I mean, every press conference is the same from TJ Otzelberger. You know exactly how they play, how they practice, how they approach every day, every game. And I think there's an element of kind of a security in that, right? You can just kind of cuddle up in your blanket while still being the fierce competitor, just knowing that this is exactly what you're getting yourself into versus rolling the dice on a Ben McCollum. Now, that's not to say that he can't succeed or he won't find that kind of consistency over years, but as it sits right now, if I were in the transfer portal, which I'm thinking about throwing my name in, to be completely honest, just to see what happens.
I heard NAL's good right now.
I know that's like, do I still have eligibility? I'm making the call. But I do think, if I had to pick between the two, I would lean Iowa State. Now, I do have a question. You mentioned it early. Obviously, the Iowa State connection is very strong, right? Cy-Hawk, is it a Cyclone State? Is it a Hawkeye State? We're not really having those conversations, but they are words that are thrown around. Iowa, Kansas State, not quite in that same conversation. How is Kansas State affected by this hire? And is Ben McCollum the demise of the Wildcats?
Yeah, this could be an issue for Kansas State. Now, first off, I will say for Iowa, I do think it's going to take some time for them to get back to being relevant, especially in the Big Ten Conference. I'm with you on that side.
Back to?
Good call. Good point. Luka Garza's not walking through that door, Nick. He's just not. It's just not happening. So, but who is probably walking through that door, and this is where I think it impacts Kansas State, is Bennett Sturtz is probably going to follow Ben McCollum to Iowa. Now, he hasn't entered the transfer portal as of this conversation between you and I, but you probably see it coming. The writing's kind of on the wall. He left and followed McCollum from D2 to Drake, and then became arguably one of the best players in the nation. If he enters the transfer portal, in my mind, if you look at On3, if you look at 24/7, he probably automatically becomes the number one guy in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
His brothers went to Kansas State. His family's from Manhattan. You think that he would want to come play for Kansas State. Kansas State's not afraid to spend money. Not afraid to do that. Did what Coleman Hawkins last year. According to On3, it's approximately going to cost $6 million this year in the transfer portal if you want to become a top 25 team. That's what an ACC coach, an anonymous coach said heading into this one from On3. Obviously you take that as you will, but with Sturtz having an opportunity to go play at a Power 4 level, in this case would be Iowa, with a familiar coach, I think that could be the demise of missing out for Kansas State. Now, is it still possible? Absolutely. Will he even enter the transfer portal? Very likely, but as of right now, that's not happening. I think he's going to get a bag wherever he goes. Is
Agreed.
The bag a little lower because he gets to go with his coach? Maybe he gets the hometown discount in the eyes of just playing with his coach again? Or can Kansas State wheel him on in? That's what I want to know. But in this eyes, if that happens, if Sturt goes to Iowa, I think there is going to be this weird type of rivalry that becomes between the Hawkeyes and Kansas State. Maybe might not come up to fruition or start seeing it, on ESPN or anything like that. But there's going to be a fan base that always hates Iowa if Sturtz goes with McCollum, because knowing that they could have had an opportunity to get him with the Wildcats.
Well, as much of a rivalry as Farmageddon is, I'm glad we could potentially join forces in the neutral
cream of the crop, brother. We got to shake hands like Hogan and Ultimate Warrior.
Yes. No, agreed. Yes. No, I'll ask you. I'm just curious because I haven't dove, deep into Kansas State as much as obviously Iowa State, and Locked On Kansas State is the best place to get your daily Kansas State content. Of course, your team every day. But Iowa seems to be kind of cleaning house. Now, it's not them doing it. It's a lot of players just going into the portal because now you don't have the same head coach and obviously not a ton of success in Iowa City this year. So it kind of seems like at this moment in time, my kind of naivete, to quote Pat McAfee, is leaning towards Sturtz. I'm just gonna go with that because for some reason I'm stuttering.
Bennett, you're right.
Yeah, Bennett. Okay. Is gonna have a spot on that team. How much playing time would he get with Kansas State?
I mean, first of all, I didn't know you spoke French, so very nice that you're stepping up your eloquence here. Bennett Sturtz would be probably the top player on Kansas State, and I think he's the top player on Iowa next year too. Wherever he goes. He was named an honorable mention for AP this year in his first year in Division I. I mean, now if he goes to a Power 4 conference, I don't think that changes. I really don't think that changes. I just would like to see it happen in the Big 12 instead of the Big 10. The only thing that is stopping him from coming to play for Kansas State is the fact that his head coach, the one he's familiar with, now has a Power 4 job. That to me is the only thing that is stopping him potentially not going to Kansas State. I think everything else, the stars align in every which way. Does he want to come play for Coach Tang? And is the money shiny enough? If that's the case, Does Manhattan have enough in their pockets to be able to just wheel them on in? Do what
Because
it follow
it's not
follow
that
the
far
family
removed.
legacy. Come with
It's really not
where your
that far.
brothers exactly. Come where your brothers went to school. Come where your family is from. Finish off your college career with Kansas State. That's what I'm hoping happens, but I'm not holding my breath for it because of Ben McCollum going to a Power 2 school. That's just, it's just the way it is. Unfortunately, that's how I have to say it on this episode. But Sturts, regardless of the case, is going to be absolutely electric. I will say this as we're wrapping up this little segment, and this is probably going to be the only nod I give to Iowa here. I wouldn't be too worried about the players leaving the portal because that seems kind of like a normal thing these days.
Oh, it's
It's
so
almost like
common.
getting a renegotiation, if you will. Once a coach leaves, some of your top players might put that word out saying, I'm entering the transfer portal, but then you usually see that little asterisk at the end, is willing to return. You've seen that multiple times on social media, I'm sure. It's almost like they want to get a renegotiation, a recommitment from the new coaching staff and the university. Usually that probably means a little bit more money in this NIL world. And then they're right back into this. So in the eyes, and probably for the only little nod I can say for Iowa here, because if you take Sturts from me, we're going to have some problems, folks. If you do, I think you don't have anything to worry about that, though, with the other players in the portal. A couple of them are probably going to be on their way back, but not all. But not all. That's the way of the beast.
That's just the reality that we're living in with the transfer portal and NIL. And I'm going to talk about in just a few seconds. So don't go anywhere. Iowa State's portal activity. And that's going to be something that you got to take with a grain of salt, kind of in the same vein, right? Are we entering the portal to leave? Are we entering the portal to just explore options? That's just the reality of this situation. That is the new age of college sports.
Yeah. Priorities for the transfer portal. That's absolutely next. So check that out right after this break.
Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trademaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. I got to say, I did not expect McCollum's hire to be impacting Kansas State, but shout out to Christian Rao for breaking that down for us. And obviously, the Farmageddon vibes there were certainly great. You are now here with Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's time to talk some transfer portal, ladies and gentlemen, as the transfer portal is now open as of yesterday. Obviously, Iowa State and their early unfortunate exit from the NCAA tournament now can turn their heads directly and fully towards the transfer portal and kind of remastering this roster for next year. This is a conversation we will be having multiple times over the next few months, probably quite a few months actually, until really football, and honestly even maybe throughout football there will be some noise that we'll have to talk about. But at the beginning of this portal, of course, there's names being thrown around. There's rumors. There's this, there's that, and we got to break it all down. The first thing I want to talk about, okay, let's start it off on a positive note, and then we'll kind of sandwich the not so great news in the middle and round it out at the end. We've got a few players that are coming back for the Cyclones. Now, a few names we haven't gotten official confirmation, either yes or no, from Taman Lipsy and Milan Momcilovic, two of those names. I just don't know what's going to happen with them. Those are two names that we would assume would be coming back, but as it sits right now, we don't have an answer. On the other hand, we do know that Nate Heisey is coming back and Joshua Jefferson is coming back. Per Ben Hutchins, J. Jeff is 100% coming back. A quote from Joshua Jefferson, quote, Iowa State took care of me from the beginning. So from film sessions to talking with me so much, they really took care of me on the floor. And so definitely a program I want to continue with. Now, that's a great sign. Obviously, we've talked so highly of Joshua Jefferson on this program. And Nate Heisey, in that same vein, really stepped up for this program in the last few weeks. Obviously, with Keyshawn's kind of diminishing play, value kind of towards the team, just from a graph standpoint. If you missed that episode, I actually graphed it out. And then on top of, just Nate Heisey stepping up, like he played a lot of minutes, and he really capitalized at the end of the year compared to the beginning of the year. And I think that was a positive thing for him to kind of look back on and realize, you know what, Iowa State is a great place to play. And I'm going to come back. Now, there are some names that are leaving Iowa State. A couple, just, I think it's 4 right now. Demarion Watson, a name that is in the transfer portal. JT Rock. We didn't see a whole lot of JT Rock this year, but a fan favorite for sure. Caden Fish, also in the transfer portal. Yet again, did not see a ton of him. But still a great player. And then Deshaun Jackson, obviously one of the 2 big men that was kind of a core piece of this team. Obviously, Brandon Chatfield in there as well, but Brandon Chatfield, to my knowledge, has no more eligibility. I believe he is done. But either way, that being said, it's Deshaun Jackson that is in the transfer portal. And I've seen that he is kind of testing the waters. I don't know for sure if he's in he's in the transfer portal. I know that, but like, could he return to Iowa State? I don't have an answer for you. Obviously, Deshaun Jackson had some amazing minutes for the Cyclones, averaged 8.5 points, 5.1 boards in just 19 minutes per game. Those are relatively pretty amazing stats, kind of based on the scheme that Iowa State ran. So that was a big shout out to Deshaun Jackson. And in his tweet, I didn't love this. I'd like to take just a second here because this is Locked On Cyclones. He said, "Thank you." And then with the smiling with a tear emoji, said, "Regardless of the hate you've made this year, one that I will never forget." And then with a couple of pictures of him playing in the Cardinal and Gold. And so, I just wanted to address really quickly that I don't think that that's something that we should be. I don't love that. I really don't. I don't love that the Cyclone players are having to deal with hate in any way, shape, or form. I mean, at the end of the day, these guys are just a couple college kids that are really good at putting an orange ball into an orange rim. And not to dwell on this too much, but I just don't think that that's fair to them. And so, obviously, not calling anyone out because I don't even know what the situation is, but I just didn't love that was kind of Deshaun Jackson. It left enough of an impact for him to put it in the like, hey, I am going in the transfer portal here. And I just didn't love that per se. Now, I'd like to take a second to talk about that, but there also are other things we got to talk about. So Demarion Watson entering the transfer portal, I think that's actually pretty big, and I'm a little disappointed in just we didn't see a lot of Demarion Watson, and I thought we should have potentially seen more. A comment that I made in the squad show this week. This is, we saw some really great play from Demarion Watson. Especially late in the season in a team that was riddled with injuries. I really thought he could have been utilized more. Unfortunately, he was not, and he has decided to potentially move on, at least to enter the transfer portal and see what is out there. And so best of luck to all of these guys, Demarion Watson, JT Rock, bright future ahead of him, Deshaun Jackson, of course, and his ability. And then finally, I don't have it. It's the Caden Fish. I don't know why I totally blanked on his name. Excuse me. And so, this best of luck to these guys. But now Iowa State does need to look into bringing in a few guys to answer those questions. And obviously the guys that are leaving due to eligibility restraints. And a name that's been tossed around is Oscar Clough out of South Dakota State and the Jackrabbits. Now, the South Dakota State, very solid basketball team. Of course, everybody remembers them. And this Oscar Clough guy, dog. Okay. And so I did see he was in the portal with a no contact type of situation. But also, I did also see that he was in Ames meeting with coaches. And so I think that's a great sign. I don't know what that whole thing entails, but I just saw a tweet about that. I also don't know how credible that is. I'm not saying that I was there for this meeting. I'm just saying I just heard something like that. So it seems like Iowa State is in on these talks. And as far as Oscar Clough and what he was able to do this season, averaged 17.6 points per game, 12.3 rebounds, 2.8 assists. Those are pretty unbelievable numbers. I'm not going to lie. Shot 63% from the floor, 6'11", 260 pounds. This would be an unbelievable pickup for the Cyclones. And obviously, the transfer portal, brand new. We're going to look into these names. We're going to look into more transfer portal names. And we're going to kind of dive into where I think they would fit really well with this team. But it seems to me like Oscar Clough just would slide right in, no problem, and would have no. I mean, he would fit perfectly into TJ's scheme. And now, obviously, if Deshaun Jackson is leaving and Brandon Chatfield, that height on the inside could be a real weapon for this Cyclones team. But also, I just think that this, as a whole, this Mr. Clough really could kind of stand out. Shot 66% from three this year, 4 of 6, but still, when he shot it, it was more than likely going in. And so I think that also is a side of this. 85 assists on the year, an unbelievable year for Oscar Clough. And to make the move to Ames, it's a big jump, obviously, into the Big 12. Nate Heisey, another name that kind of went from UNI to the Big 12, and it took a while for him to heat up. So I don't know exactly what will happen right away, but I think that this is a great acquisition target for the Cyclones. And then I really think it comes down to, we need to at least get one guard. And now we'll break down, obviously, the recruiting class, the guys coming in. This team isn't just dead in the water, stranded, swimming around, trying to figure out what's going on. Like, they have a plan. But also a couple transfer portal guys would be key, because we saw what transfer portal guys were able to do this season for the Iowa State Cyclones. Obviously, Curtis Jones, Joshua Jefferson at the top of that list. And just bringing in that experience is something that I think that it's hard to really beat. You know, they've seen it before. They've seen what it takes to win before. It's kind of a win-win, other than you just don't get that many years of eligibility remaining. So I think if Iowa State can be active in the transfer portal on top of what seems to be already a great recruiting class and strengthening that Wisconsin kind of pipeline, Iowa State is going to be in a great position moving forward to make a deep run in the Big 12 next year. And this isn't a preview, show, but I just think that I do think, where Iowa State is right now with the transfer portal, with the names being tossed around, this is a spot where they can absolutely springboard themselves forward and not just kind of stay in the same spot. Right. And I think that this year and the success that they've had, obviously in the top 15 all year long, making this, the round of 32, making the tourney again, a 3 seed, all of these things all contribute to showing that Iowa State can show success. Like materialistically, we have had success. And so that's going to obviously bring people in as well. And like I said, there are other names being floated around. But as of right now, those are the names that I do have actual data on. And we'll keep you updated on all of those names in the transfer portal, because this is like kind of the most exciting time of the year. Wild that it's during the NCAA tournament, for sure. We've already seen some shakeups with teams in the tournament, but also this is prime time. So don't go anywhere here at Locked On Cyclones. We'll keep you in the loop. But until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.